Welcome back to Mind and Magic. Today we're going to talk about whether or not your magic practice can cause hauntings and other paranormal activity. So let's get into it. Alright, so this is going to tie in with the previous video on magical maintenance. If you haven't seen that, I will leave a link to it right here. But in that video, I talked about how if you don't keep up the maintenance work on a lot of your ongoing magic, it will eventually wear off. However, I had neglected to mention that this may not always be the case. For example, Indian burial grounds. Messing with or building upon an Indian burial site is notoriously known for causing paranormal activity of the malicious variety. This is because they have created servitors to guard their burial sites. But unlike the servitors that we create that have a finite lifespan and need to be fed to sustain them, the servitors that were created to guard Indian burial sites are programmed to feed from other sources to be self-sustaining so they can endlessly guard their final resting places. So these alleged hauntings and other paranormal activity that takes place around these Indian burial sites are not hauntings per se from Indian spirits. They are a result of their magical work, servitors being created for the purpose of getting people to leave. That's their job. Their job is to scare you off. So yes, magic can cause paranormal activity that mimics hauntings if we purposefully create a servitor to last the ages, which I don't recommend, by the way, to guard something endlessly. But can magic cause this type of activity even if we don't purposefully mean it to? Yes. One of the ways that you can inadvertently cause paranormal activity in your home or in your sacred space, wherever that may be, is leaving doors open. And by doors, I mean portals to the other side, the spirit realm, so to speak. This is one of the laws of magic. Always close doors behind you when you're done with your rituals. Anytime you cast a circle in your sacred space and perform a ritual, close the doors behind you when you're done. Seal up your circle. Anytime you play with the Ouija board, which is something I recommend you don't do, make sure you close the door behind you. If you're using a pendulum, a spirit box for EVPs, anything to do with contacting spirits at all, or anything designed to open your subconscious at all, you should close doors behind you. And we do this by giving a license to depart. And then we close the door after. This is something that I've done many times in many videos, so I'm not going to do it again here. But you have to make sure that the doors are closed, otherwise something may inadvertently come through that is uninvited and unintentional. And then all of a sudden you start having weird activity. So it should always be a habitual part of your practice to close the doors behind you. It should always be considered just part of whatever ritual or rite that you're doing. And you really don't want to cause any weird activity this way because you never know what's going to come through if you leave a door open. It may be something that's not a big deal and you could send back real easy. Or if you're real unlucky, you may have just made the biggest mistake of your life and you now have a real fight on your hands. And as rare as this is, it's simply not worth the risk. Now, another way that magic can seemingly cause paranormal activity without intending to is by passing your ritual tools on to others without first deconsecrating them. This commonly happens when a magician passes away and their ritual tools are then given to their family and they either keep them or they sell them off on eBay, what have you. And because the owner may have passed away unexpectedly, then they never really had a chance to deconsecrate them, which leaves the tools charged. Then they get taken out of their sacred ritual space and put on a shelf somewhere, or packed in a box somewhere, and then strange things begin happening. Consecrated ritual tools and implements can hold their charge for a long time. All that residual spiritual energy from all of those rituals left on the tools and implements of a magician can have some rather adverse effects when removed from their ritual space and put in the possession of people who don't even know what they are or what they're for. One of, if not the best, paranormal show that came out during the onslaught of paranormal shows was one called The Haunted Collector. And 90% of the time it would be an item that would be the cause of all the paranormal activity. And these usually fell into two groups: an item that was possessed by somebody that had passed on, or an item that was used in ritual. Tools and implements that have been used in ritual should always be deconsecrated when giving them to someone else. And if they're not, then it should be disclosed as such, because these things can cause the type of paranormal activity that we're talking about. Once you consecrate a ritual tool, it is no longer like any of your other mundane objects. It is a magical implement. It has been given a charge and a purpose to be used for your magical practice only. And depending on how long it's been used in rituals, will determine the amount of charge it has accrued. A ritual tool that has been used over many, many years is going to have a far stronger charge than one that has been used for a few months. And if a magical practitioner has passed on, it is not uncommon for their ritual implements to have been used for a very long time. This is something that not a lot of other people talk about, and I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about it on YouTube. This was something that I picked up a long time ago, that if you ever pass on your ritual tools, that you need to deconsecrate them. Or if you know that the end is near, as unfortunate as that would be, to also deconsecrate your ritual tools and your sacred space. The tools and items that you have aren't the only thing that can hold a charge. Your actual room or temple in your home can as well. And if you don't deconsecrate these things, then you may inadvertently and accidentally pass on a big problem to your family when you pass on. So if you ever move, you want to deconsecrate your ritual space or temple room. You don't want to leave a consecrated room for the next person moving in, or they could have some strange activity start up. So yes, your magical practice can cause the type of activity that some would classify as a haunting. However, you now know what to do to avoid that if you ever pass down or sell off your magical tools. If you're in it for life, you're in it for life, and take precautions and possibly leave instructions to those inheriting your stuff on how to deconsecrate your ritual items, and thereby removing its charge. Again, including your sacred space. I want to thank you for joining me. Let me know if you've ever had to deconsecrate an item before passing it on to someone, or have had any experience with what we've talked about today. The top super thanks will be pinned at the top. Visit mindandmagic.com for programs and more. And consider subscribing on Patreon, Subscribestar, or YouTube memberships for early access to videos like these. I think we're about 3 months ahead of everybody on YouTube. So with the free trial on Patreon, you can get 3 months worth of early access plus exclusive content without having to even pay anything up front. And that will about do it for today. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Take care.